All right, well, welcome everybody to the bonus session for Ready to Love. And this bonus session is going to center on confronting and navigating your fears when it comes to dating. Now, obviously, we could go and do like a whole semester on what it means to conquer fears with jobs or with anything holding us back. But because we are doing group coaching as midlife daters and being ready for love, we are going to focus on how to conquer the fear of dating. So I am going to go ahead and show my screen with you guys because you know me and I love my PowerPoints. Nicole knows that I live for my PowerPoints. So let me share that screen with you all. Okay, we'll do that, share the screen. Maybe. Okay, here we go. Now we're cooking with butter. All right, and let me just put this. All right, can you ladies see my screen?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So for the hour or so that I have you guys, and if we have, more conversation than that, that's fine. But if not, that's great too. Here's some of the things that I would like us to cover today. So first thing is we are going to take a look at and define what fear actually means within the context of dating again at midlife, as well as finding love again, becoming vulnerable, putting ourselves out there. Then we're actually going to understand the origins and issues that we have when it comes to fear and trepidation when we are trying to date again and find love. We are going to take a look at the how and why it's actually holding us back from finding what could be the greatest love story of our lives. And then we're actually going to focus more on what I like to call the fear navigation plan, which is a part of the dating DNA framework that we discuss in the Ready for Love group coaching. So let's take a look at a couple of these and we can actually have a little bit of discussion about this. Now, like we had talked about before, fear in terms of I'm afraid to drive, or I'm afraid to go out in the snow, which is not a great thing if you're in upstate New York or Colorado for that matter, but I'm afraid. So fear, though, when it comes to putting ourselves out there, because most women at midlife have already been in serious relationships, whether they were partnerships or whether it was being married, and what that fear looks like when it is getting back out there. So what does that look like? So what I have seen as a midlife dating coach, as well as a divorce coach, is that kind of looks like I believe the technical term is, oh God, do I really need to go back out there and date? Do I really need to do that? And it's never like, oh, I don't have enough time to date. I know we love to use that excuse, or I'm too busy to date. I know that I use that excuse after my shit show of a divorce. But what fear looks like is, I just don't want to put myself out there again because I haven't dated in 20 years or 25 years. And I'm afraid that I'm not going to know what I'm doing. I'm afraid that I'm going to look awkward. What am I supposed to do? Go to a bar? I'm afraid that I'm going to be the weird, sad old lady at the bar. Am I supposed to go on an online website? I'm afraid that I'm going to see one too many dick pics. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm afraid I'm going to get scammed. I mean, we've probably all seen the Tinder swindler.
Have
So
been scammed.
exactly. You have been scammed. I mean, like, I was scammed. It was called my first marriage. And so I completely understand. We have that fear of that's what it looks like. And then there's also kind of the fears that we have of being women dating, that is this person going to, he might seem nice, but is he going to be violent? Am I going to be a victim of some kind of a violent crime? Am I going to have my money stolen? So there are those types of fears that we deal with. The fears of looking awkward, the fears of not knowing what we're doing, the fears of being scammed, the fears of our time being wasted, the fear of maybe the fact that we do actually meet a wonderful person, the fear of maybe seeing that, hey, they're actually much better than our ex-boyfriends, our ex-husbands and ex-partners, the fear that, oh, maybe we're going to fall in love again, the fear may be that we're going to be vulnerable again, the fear that maybe we give our heart to somebody and maybe, like our ex-husbands or our ex-boyfriends, they break our hearts again. The fear that all that hope that we put in putting ourselves out there and making ourselves available and making ourselves vulnerable, the fear that maybe like these past relationships, that person does not care and respect and cherish us and care and hold our heart carefully. So that's what that fear looks like at dating after midlife, dating at midlife and beyond. It goes beyond getting scammed, which is certainly an issue. Anybody who goes on the hellscape that is online dating can deal with that. It does look like we're going to waste our time. And that's something that unfortunately, we as women at midlife, we're worried about. We say, well, you know what? I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not 22 anymore. It's not like if my boyfriend breaks up with me, I can just go out, the next day and go find a new boyfriend at the Buffalo Bills game. I mean, we as women at midlife, our time is more valuable. We don't have all that time to date. So our time is precious. And so those are the things that we worry about. Fear at midlife and putting ourselves out there looks like we're scared of wasting our time. We are scared of possible shadiness, possible violence, things like that are very much valid. But more importantly, and I see as my experience as a dating coach, is that I'm afraid of giving my heart again to somebody and it not being returned in kind. I'm afraid of putting all into a relationship like I did my marriage, like I did my former relationship, and it ends up being a pattern like the relationship that ended, that maybe the person cheated on me. Maybe that person abused me. Maybe I ended up doing all the work in the relationship. And then I have dedicated my whole heart. I have dedicated my whole being. I have thrown myself in. I have fallen in love. And that is not reciprocated. And I am afraid I'm going to spend all that time and all that money and all that effort into this new relationship only to be back at square one. So why the hell should I even bother doing that? So that is what fear at midlife looks like. So what does that fear feel like? Now, I know what it feels like for me. And as a dating coach for midlife women, I sure as shit know what it feels like for the women that I have the blessing to work with. And that is this fear of they want so badly to have that love. But there is that kind of feeling like it's frustrating because what it looks like and what it feels like is scarcity. I'm running out of time. What it looks like is a lack of self-confidence and a lack of confidence that, oh, because I am not having that external validation, or I'm not having that person tell me I'm pretty, or I'm not having that physical intimacy and that emotional intimacy that I love and I crave because I am a human and I need those things, it feels bad. It makes us feel empty. It makes us feel frustrated. It makes us question our self-worth. It makes us question our self-esteem. And there's a sense of loneliness. It feels lonely, right? We're afraid to date because we're afraid of getting our heart broken. But then because we're not dating, we feel so frustrated, like we're going to die alone and we're going to be alone for the rest of our lives. And that fear feels like, oh my God, is this all the rest of my life is? Is to work my ass off every day? Is to take care of my family and my friends, but then I'm coming home and I'm just binge watching Netflix and then I'm eating way too much takeout food? I know what that feels like because I was there too. And I've seen that with every single one of my clients. So we know what that fear feels like. And so it's also time to think about when we talk about defining fear. I'm not going to give you ladies an Encyclopedia Britannica introduction. I don't even think people like not at midlife even know what that is, but I'm glad I can make that reference for the women that I work with. But so why do we feel afraid to find love again? So that's the next question that we have to think about when we're taking a look at fear and letting go of fear when we date. Why do we feel afraid to find love again? And this is what we have to understand. This is the work that we need to do. This is also considered the origins of your fear. Now we need to reflect on, and it is our duty and our responsibility, if we want to find love again, and if we want to put ourselves out there, we need to understand the origins of our fear, because there's no point in denying it. So I would invite you guys to think about that for a minute. Really taking a look at What are the reasons that you're afraid to date? What are the reasons that you're afraid to find love? What are the reasons that you're afraid to be vulnerable and put yourself out there? I would just invite you guys to take a minute to kind of jot that down. We can talk about it if you'd like. I'm happy to share with you some of the reasons that I was afraid to find love, but Nancy, please, like if you want to share anything that you have.
Well, I mean, let's be real, let's go to like bureaucratic, I mean, like just like nuts and bolts. I live in the same town my former spouse lives in. And so it's and we still live not far from each other. And I don't ever want to see his freaking face ever again. And I don't want to be on a date and see his freaking face either. And, like that's part of what I don't, that's a fear of seeing him because I think I might throw up then if I had to. And then the other thing is, I just have had so many bad experiences dating. I haven't dated a lot. I mean, it never really turned out to be like a lot of dating. I sort of got into relationships in a weird way. Like my husband wasn't my friend. And so, it wasn't really, I was going on a lot of dates, or my old boyfriend I met because he was the son of my boss. I mean, so it wasn't like I've dated a lot. So the idea of being out with like some ugly man that's like a jerk and then being stuck there is just like, that makes me very and plus I haven't been on a date so long. So, I mean, of course I imagine the worst. So, I mean, those are some of my reasons.
Right. No, completely understandable. I think a lot of times the origins of our fear are always from past experiences that did not serve us. Now, we would not have a lot of fear to go out and date if we always dated wonderful men who treated us well. But chances are, if we are working with a midlife dating coach and we were following that, we did not have a lot of relationships where the people treated us well, or if they did, maybe they didn't last for long. Maybe there was a passing, maybe there was somebody moved away, maybe just the relationship didn't work because of family dynamics. And so the important part, though, is to not deny the reasons that you're fearful, but it is just to get very clear on the reasons you're fearful, because we can't solve what we don't know. We can't fix what's in the dark. What's in the dark needs to be brought out in the light. And so I would give you permission, and it's almost your right and your responsibility as someone who is at midlife, wanting to date again and looking to conquer that fear, or at least navigate that fear, is to get very acquainted with that fear and say, you know what? I understand why I'm afraid. I am afraid because when I put my heart out last time, I was not treated well by that person. I'm afraid because it was a great relationship and that person passed away. And I am afraid because something that I had identified myself with and I had defined myself with was taken away from me. I am afraid because I understand I am the person who puts a lot of effort and time into a relationship, but I'm afraid that everything I've built, if I am paired with a partner who abuses me or who does not treat me with the respect I deserve, everything that I built could be taken away from me. That's a very valid fear. As someone who was a divorce coach and a divorce recovery coach, I experienced that and dealt with clients with that all the time. And they were very fearful to go out and date because they were terrified that they were going to end up being with another man or attracting a partner who was kind of a scrounge, who only wanted them for their money. But the key to overcoming that fear is to know that fear, is to know that fear in and out, and to look at that fear not from a standpoint of it is going to overtake you, but to look at that fear from a standpoint of curiosity. Look at it from as a science experiment, or as a specimen. That take a look at your fear as a microscope and say, you know what, let me see this fear. Well, let me see. I think I'm fearful because this was the experience I had. I think I'm fearful because I don't think I can be rejected again. I think I'm fearful because I was just so hurt and my self-esteem was completely shattered from that situation. I think I'm fearful because that grief I have because I lost that person and I lost that thought of the future I had. I lost that identity. It was totally yanked from me. And to me, it is exhausting to have to do that again, rebuild my identity. And so let's get that all out in the open. Because when you understand the problem, then you can figure out and take those steps to work through that problem. And so another question for reflection, hey, that rhymes. When we look at what does it mean to identify our fear and to really kind of get comfortable with it, as comfortable as you can get when you're analyzing your fear, is what happens if you don't bring that fear out into light? What happens if you let that fear win? So this is what I see working with the women that I do, is they let that fear win before they come and work with me. Even when we're navigating our time together in the coaching client relationship, what I see and what I observe is that these women who are incredible, much like you guys, are incredible, hardworking badasses. They are carrying this weight of this fear, and they are letting the fear take the driver's seat. Now, I'm not going to be one of these. I know there's coaches that have that, what I like, it's called like toxic positivity, that is just like face your fears and go off and post an Instagram post about it. I'm not that type of coach. You guys know that. But what I would invite instead is, don't let that fear be in the driver's seat. What can you do to let that fear? You might never ever get rid of it, but what you can do is manage it. What you can do is minimize it. What you can do is let it be the backseat driver. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have had a long history of lots of backseat drivers, probably because I'm not a great driver. I mean, it could be that. It could be like I drive like a bat out of hell. I'm on the East Coast, so I drive like an asshole now. And so what happens though when I have backseat drivers is I choose to ignore them. Or sometimes I might be like, oh yeah, they are seeing that don't turn left sign. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, they're probably right. Let me do that. And so I would invite you to reframe your fear, not as something that chokes you out, not as something that is going to dictate your life, not as something that is going to drive your decisions on everything, but as to something that, you know what, maybe every once in a while it's useful. If there is fear that somebody is saying let's say that you're online and you're talking to somebody who's too good to be true, and he just happens to tell you that he's in Dubai right now and he works for the British Navy, but then he lost his passport, and oh my goodness, could you still give him money? Don't be afraid. If there's a little bit of fear, like, oh my God, what if this guy's a scammer? It is okay for fear to help you in that perspective. So that's fine. That's like the backseat driver that's like, hey, this is a one way. Yeah, you want to listen to the backseat driver that one time, but you don't want to listen to the backseat driver if they're just like, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down. Was that just my driver's ed experience? Maybe. So that is much like when we take a look at what we want to have as the role that fear is playing in our life. If there's fear that says, don't ever date again, don't ever date again, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do the grief, you can't do the rejection, you can't do the ghosting. That is the backseat driver that you want to say, yo, shut the fuck up. So I'm not going to leave you with that though. What I'm going to do now though, now that we've talked about what does fear look like at midlife dating, what does your fear feel like? Neither one of those feel good. And we've also examined what are the origins of our fear, which most of the time comes from past relationships that did not serve us, past relationships that caused us to question our self-esteem, or caused us to lose somebody that we loved, or caused us to feel lonely. So we've talked about the origins of fear at midlife dating. And we also discussed what happens if you let the fear win. What happens if you let the fear drive your decisions and be the main driver instead of letting it be the backseat driver? So now that we've established all of those, I'm not just going to leave you guys with face your fears, because I know it's not that easy. And it's somebody who was a midlife dater as well, who went through a very painful divorce. And I know Nicole can vouch for this because she and I have been friends for well over 20 years, and she has seen me every step of the way. And I know, Nancy, you probably heard me talk about this a little bit during our coaching sessions. But as somebody who went through a nasty divorce, who hadn't dated in, oh my God, well over 10 years, having no idea what I was doing, having my self-esteem completely shattered, and then making all of these really stupid mistakes until I developed my dating DNA framework, what I found which really helped me learn how to date better at midlife, was setting up a fear navigation plan. And so I have 5 steps for you all to think about, and this is something that you're going to have to build on. Now, at the end of this session, hell yeah, I want you guys to have like a great outline of your own fear navigation plan. But after the session, I would invite you to reflect on that and refine that in your own time. So let's take a look at the fear navigation plan. And I like to call this the way to make sure that that fear stays in the backseat. So we discussed about this a little bit in the previous slide, but step number 1, I would invite you all to name it. Name all of it. Name all of your midlife dating fears, no matter how small, no matter how silly, no matter how terrifying, no matter how awkward, no matter how embarrassing. What is the exact thing you're afraid of? Is it getting hurt again? Is it losing somebody that you deeply love? Is it having your trust betrayed? Is it being betrayed by somebody you love? Is it feeling rejected by somebody who you had a lot of hope for? And feeling rejected isn't just for something at the end of a long-term relationship. I have a lot of women that I coach who go on a couple of dates with a man that they are really excited about, who checks the boxes, who seems emotionally available, who is not still living in their parents' basement at 55, who seems to have a pretty good relationship with his adult children. And you know what happens is they sleep together, and then in like a classic college student move, the man ghosts her. And so I have clients who can't deal with that, who are, I'm afraid of putting myself out there, I'm afraid of being physically intimate and doing that, and then the guy just leaves. It took me years to kind of get over that. And I personally kept making that mistake time and time and time and time again, wanting to be physically intimate. But then for me, how I was wired, physical intimacy meant emotional attachment, only to find out that the guy just kind of was too busy for me after he got what he needed. And being very fearful of that and shutting myself off for a while. So that was a fear that I personally was dealing with. So another one is feeling used. I have so many clients and friends that I've worked with and have been, in close relationship for years in this work that I've been doing, who then it's not even the physical intimacy, it's not even the sex. But what they'll do is the guy that they're dating or the guy that they're, that they're with will call them, and they almost become like their therapist, because that's what we as women do, right? We shoulder the emotional labor and the emotional burden for everybody, including the men that we date. And so they're like, all of those times, he doesn't, he called me, he talked to me for, for hours. I helped him through XYZ. I was there when his mother was in the hospital, XYZ. And then 2 months later, he says he has a girlfriend. I feel so used. He used me for my emotional labor. And so whatever those fears you have with midlife dating, which are making you scared to get out there again, all of those fears are valid. We are not here to say that fear is dumb, that fear isn't really a fear, get over it. That's not what we do here. We're grown-ass women, we're not doing that. But what I would invite you to do is list every single one of those. And I would also then invite you to list that, and then, take some time if you want to go back to that list a little bit later, after a day, after a glass of wine, even, just taking some time to reflect on it, and go back and list some more if you want. Nothing is off limits in step 1. So my question is, and this is completely safe, non-judgmental space, does anybody have any fear that they would like to discuss? Completely optional.
I have like an entire list of fears.
Okay, that's fair. Your fears are fair. Your fears are fears. Well, are you comfortable sharing any?
Yeah, I could do like probably a top three, I guess, or something.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever
Um,
you're comfortable sharing.
One is fear of loss, and I know it's not necessarily rational, but it's still there. So Nancy, the backstory, as Martha knows, is I lost someone I really cared a lot about to a suicide. And so there was a whole guilt phase associated with that, but also I
Okay.
think a fear of like, what if I lose someone again? And
Right.
I even noticed it popping up in my thoughts like 2018, 2019, because I was at least sort of, chatting a little bit with like men I found attractive, but some were also coworkers. So it was like not a good environment really to try to explore it necessarily,
Right.
especially at that moment in time. But I also noticed some of my inner thoughts were like, well, what if I'm close to someone and I lose them again? And then it was magnified by some of what was happening with my brother, which involved drugs and threats against the family. And so I even had moments where I would think things like, what if I get close to someone and they're killed because of me, or something like that? Like, it just, that sort of fear
Right.
was there and tended to skew still towards not only loss of relationship, but like loss of life. And it was just, I think that's not as present now when I think about trying to date in this moment. But I think there's still that fear of like, what if I'm close to someone and then I lose that closeness? And then I would say one is I don't went to college, like fear, like I now have not dated in so long that I just feel like a big weirdo, right? So I think it's like fear of like, what if he thinks I'm a weirdo because I haven't dated in a long time? It's like Sleeping Beauty kind of scenario or something going on over here. And so I would say that that's a fear. I don't know what that is. Fear of judgment, or just fear of
Just not
movements or
knowing.
something. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Like
Fear of the unknown.
yeah,
Absolutely.
fear of the unknown, or and then I do think, and this is, I think, not necessarily rational either, when I think about the fact that I, am also grateful for some of my like just friendships with men, if I don't think about dating specifically. But if I go all the way back to kind of like our mid to late 20s, or even some early 20s, like I do have some fear of betrayal. Like there was, I don't know if I ever told you about this, Martha, but there's a guy I was close to in Iraq that I worked with. And that relationship stayed close afterwards for like a year and a half. Like he came out to Northern California to see me. We spent weekends in like hotels together, like different states, different places, but we stayed close and we would meet up periodically. And I eventually discovered through Andrea, actually, when she may or may not have run a background check on my behalf, that he was married. Because it reached a point in our just like spending time together that finally I was kind of like, what are we doing here? Because this has become a timeline and a number, like, like what is this? Because this is something more than like
Just friends.
blowing off
Yeah.
steam, having spent time in Iraq, like
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
like
What's going on here?
And then
Yeah.
he like just, he wasn't communicating, like the whole thing just got really weird. And I was also, I think, young enough to not understand that these weird things can happen. And then she found out for me that he was married. And
Jerk.
Yeah.
like I was so upset for so many reasons, but like there was a very strong sense of betrayal. And I was also upset because I like, no marriage is easy, I don't think. But to me, it's like I should also have had a say in whether I wanted to engage with someone who is in a marriage, like, because that's not something in my mind that I like want to do. Like for me, that's a line, at least from the outside. I don't know, I've never been on the inside of a marriage. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying any of these like decisions are easy, but like both people should be informed, I guess, was my point also. And so in that sense, to your point of some of your points on your slide, I felt used and like I wanted to vomit. And it was just like, what, like gross, and I need to shower, whatever. And so I also noticed that I have a fear of other people being afraid of me. Because sometimes they have been like, so I think, or maybe it plays out in like a fear of opening up, like, oh, if I let my smart side fully out, I'll scare this person. Or if I let my adventurous side fully out, you know, they might think it's a little much. And like, you ran around where in the mountains with Alicia and like did what for fun on
Yeah.
vacation, or, you know, just like
It's like a fear of judgment, like in a
fear of judgment. Yeah.
way.
Like,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
with kind of a quirky range of things. And
Yeah.
so I'm afraid to fully express that sometimes.
Yeah, no, and I think it's well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I mean, and the point is like just understanding where that fear comes from.
Yeah.
And that's not, you know, it's just because I think so many times we as women, we kind of have this shame, you know, there's like, we were born with this sense of shame. And I think the younger generation's getting better, but I know Nancy and I have talked about this kind of like, you're the dutiful daughter, you're the person who has to like take care of everybody. And especially if you were raised like in a religious household, there can be that kind of shame. And so whether it's judgment or whether it's doing the wrong thing, whatever the fuck that means, when we hide that ball then of shame and fear starts to become like a huge avalanche. But when we're like, you know what, this is what I'm afraid of, this is what has happened in the past, this and this and this, we got to get that out in the air. Because if we don't, we can't start addressing the issue. If we don't identify what is making us afraid to find love again, how the fuck are we going to find love again? if that is something that we want for ourselves in the future. And so we've talked about how this first step of the fear navigation plan is you get that shit out all in the open. Nothing is too gauche, nothing is too scandalous. You get it out in the open, you take ownership of that. That is your life, and you are entitled to share that fear without shame. And once you do that is when you start taking your power back, and we can go to step 2 of the fear navigation plan. I've got some like a 1980s kind of vibe going on, kind of with like some of these slides. Never let me with like a new PowerPoint because I'm doing like all the, let's propagate these slides. So this really ties into step 1 where we identify that. But step 2 is we list all the reasons that we're afraid of this thing. And so a lot of times you'll see the step 1 of the fear navigation plan and the step 2 will overlap. And Nicole, you did an excellent job, whether you knew it or not, you did an excellent job delineating all that. So if you said, you know, I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid of being betrayed. Okay, well, why is that? It's because of a past experience. It is because somebody that I loved deeply, I lost him. Somebody that I trusted deeply, you know, had a wife and a family. Honestly, if I had $5 for each time that has happened to one of my clients, that has happened to one of my close girlfriends, that has happened to, I think, one of my sisters, and frankly, has happened to me, I think probably I would still be a dating coach, but I would completely do it for free because I would just have been like financially independent at that point. But it is understanding the reasons that we're afraid. That I am afraid, step 1, this is my fear. These are my 5 fears. These are my 18 fears. Step 2, okay, my number 1, you know, this fear number 1 coincides with reason number 1. Fear number 2 coincides with reason number 2. And so most of the time, what I've seen in my experience as a dating coach is that our fears are usually based on a past experience. In addition to that, if we understand that, okay, I have a fear of being abandoned, another thing that has happened with a lot of my clients whose husbands left them, or if they were people pleasers or things along the lines of that, maybe that's proof of something. Maybe we feel that's proof of something, that I'm afraid of dating and giving my heart away again because he is going to leave me. And if he leaves me, that is proof that I am unlovable. That is proof of the bullshit that maybe my parents fucking told me. That is proof of my society saying that once my tits go down and I have gray hair, I should be erased. And so we carry this. And so Nancy, this goes back to what we talked about in our session last week in the group coaching session of Ready for Love, that what are these limiting beliefs and what are these toxic ass narratives that are putting a chokehold on us? And so that is something that we have to think about, that is this reason I am afraid of something, is that tied to a limiting belief I have? And that's a whole other section. That's a whole other session of releasing ourselves of those limiting beliefs and writing things that serve us. But when we are looking at that from a procedural standpoint of listing the reasons why we're afraid of that thing, what we want to do is, again, not attach judgment to that. We want to think like a scientist. We want to dig deep and we want to get curious. That, well, what are the reasons that I'm afraid of that rejection? And there's no judgment on that. There's not, oh, let it go or any of that stupid shit. No, it's okay. Well, hey, I think I'm actually kind of afraid of that because I was always picked last for the softball team, or I was always picked last for the dodgeball. And that showed that I was like a weirdo. Or, oh, I never got the most birthday presents because, my brother's birthday was a week before mine. Yeah, that's my own thing. Or, I feel like I'm going to be ignored. And I always felt like I was ignored in my child, as a child. And, I was ignored. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so, those are the things that we get very curious on, not as a judgmental thing, but as understanding ourselves better. And sometimes in order to understand ourselves better, we do kind of need to take a third person view from that with that curiosity of the scientist. But something I would caution you all on doing this when you are kind of digging deep, only do it in a way that does not trigger you. Only do it in a way that is not invoking PTSD or things along the lines of that, because that is going to kind of set us back to we need to bring ourselves away from that. But go from
example what you're talking about. I mean, like, just, I don't know, if we're fear of something, I mean, just, what do you mean? Just like the trigger or whatever, you're trying to get over this fear, but you put yourself in harm's way or something like that.
Right. So it's kind of like a metaphorical. Here's an example. One of my clients, one of my private clients, she was dating somebody that she didn't like, but she just knew it wasn't the relationship for her, but she was afraid of dumping him, and she was afraid of like letting it go because she was afraid of being alone. And so when we were kind of looking at, well, what are the reasons that you're afraid of being alone? What happened was it brought her to a place where she remembers when she was 6 years old, the dad packing up a suitcase and just leaving the family. And that caused just a breakdown. And, her saying, I'm so sorry. I think we need to work through this. I'm so sorry. I can't do this. I can't do this. This pain is too real. Because that was a trigger that was a wound that we still needed to work on. So that's kind of, that's an example of that. Or if there was, for me, there was a while, this was when I was in college, there was a fear when I was first with a serious boyfriend, that I was terrified of being intimate with him because I had been a survivor of a sexual assault younger when I was in college. And so I didn't have the skill set or that articulation to be like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And so that was, if you are having a flashback or if it is bringing up PTSD, which I think, unfortunately, as women living in society, unfortunately, I think a good 100% of us have experienced a traumatic event that might be a trigger that might be tied to a fear. And so that is what we mean is when we were looking at the navigation, we don't want to get ourselves in a situation that we can't get out of without the help of a therapist. So is that helpful, Nancy? Okay. All right. So we've talked about identifying the fears. We have talked about the reasons that we are afraid of that. And so now let's take a look at the step 3. Now, again, I want to caveat, if this is triggering or if this is bringing back a PTSD flashback, this is not the time to do this type of work. That would be if you're feeling that you're going to a place where it is a PTSD or a flashback, you're going to want to stop and you want to contact the therapist that you're working with. But this is if we can do this from a place that it isn't going to cause like a flashback. If we're removed enough from that place that we can have an understanding without it causing mass anxiety or cause like a PTSD flashback. So let's take a look though at this part of bravely imagining the worst. This is not meant to cause anxiety, but this is a tool to become empowered. So let's play this out. So saying, I'm afraid of dating again because here's an example. I'm afraid of dating again because I'm afraid of feeling used if I sleep with somebody too early and them rejecting me and them ghosting me and not contacting me. So let's bravely imagine the worst case scenario for that. So we meet a guy, we think he really clicks. We like him. We go on a couple of dates, and we're intimate. We have sex, and because this is how we're wired, unfortunately, as women, we release all the dopamines, and then we are emotionally bonded to him, which happens, and that's kind of a mechanism of our biology, which is really annoying. And then we feel like, oh my God, I'm really into this guy. Oh, wait, do I love him? And you start like imagining you hyphening his last name with yours. And then, oh, well, what kind of ceremony is it going to be? And we just kind of do this, what I call emotional masturbation. We as women love doing that, what kind of house are we going to get together? Or where are we going to vacation? Just kind of like this kind of stuff. What is going to be the meet cute? And then next thing we know, he hasn't called. Oh, he's busy. A week goes by, we haven't heard from him, so we text him, and then we look on our iPhones and it's a sea of blue, and it's just us having texted him a whole bunch. And then so let's say that happens. Let's play that okay, we sleep with the guy and he then he ghosts us. We have to think of, okay, what if that happened? God forbid, what if that happened? What if that thing that we fear becomes a reality? What if I get rejected? What if I get broken up with? What if I have my hopes up for a guy and then he disappoints me? All right, let's for a minute play that game. What if that does happen? What steps immediately, if that happens, what kind of triage are you going to do for yourself to make yourself feel safe in that situation? To make yourself feel the self-worth that you deserve that's probably in jeopardy in that situation?
Consider the source. If the guy's a jerk, I mean,
Yep.
realize that maybe you made a mistake in who this person was, but I mean, that's not necessarily a reflection on you because
Exactly.
you didn't know he was going to be like that. I mean, all right, so maybe you're not perfect at this yet, but
right, exactly. That you're like, you know what, yeah, I'm practicing. I didn't, yeah, this guy was a jerk, and worst case scenario, it's like you're gonna feel, because like, oh well, you know what, this guy is showing me who he is right away. So
Right.
it's so much better to know that this guy's going to ghost me after being intimate with him, because a bad week is better than a bad 6 months with somebody.
Right.
It's better than a bad, year with somebody. So that is a way to feel safe, that, okay, this is not the person for me. So what do you do to make yourself in this imaginary situation feel loved and cared for? What would you do in that situation?
Seek out friends.
Yeah. Absolutely. Your friends are there for you. I mean, I know Nicole's always been there for me, when we've been in situations like this. And if you're in a good relationship with family members, I would know that I would call my sister, my little sister, and we would dish, and she's a couple time zones away, but she'd be like, okay, let's FaceTime. I got you. I'm sending you an Uber Eats right now. And so thinking about what are the things, would it be taking a breathing exercise? Would it be automatically accepting that it's okay to cry your eyes out and bawl your eyes out in that situation? Would it be, going and taking a walk? Those types of things. Would it be watching one of your favorite movies? Would it be a meditation? What are the immediate triage things that you would do in that imaginary situation to make yourself feel cared for? So we've talked about identifying the fear, understanding why we feel that fear, and then bravely imagining the worst for that fear. So let's take a look at the fourth part of the fear navigation plan. This is where we plan our recovery. So we've already triaged, we've already done the triage, the acute solving of the problem in our fear navigation plan. So now let's take a look at how do we plan that long-term recovery. And so say a mean boy broke your heart. let's say that happens again. Say you've been dating somebody for 6 months. here's an example that there was somebody that said he wasn't ready for a relationship, but you feel like he's acting like your boyfriend. He's calling you, he's taking you out, you haven't met his family yet, but then you find out that, yeah, he's just emotionally unavailable and he's doing the same thing to 5 other women, and you feel like a fool. And so you've done the triage on that this guy's a jerk, let's go burn his house down. Just kidding. But, or, I'm going to talk to my friends, I'm going to go watch him, I'm going to do the meditation, I'm going to do the affirmation. So then after that situation, after that kind of immediate issue, what does your self-care look like? What are you going to do to make yourself feel better in that next week after that worst case scenario, in the next couple of weeks? Is it that you start going back to yoga because he's thinking, I'm going to center myself? Is it that you go and reach out to your guy friends and say, hey, you know what? I really need that, kind of that male kind of attention right now. Can you please tell me 3 great things about me? Is it reaching out to your family members? And those things are okay to do. Is it going and taking yourself to dinner? Is it planning a getaway for yourself and your girlfriends? All of these things are valid to make yourself come back down from that fear, to help you regulate your nervous system. Is it making sure that maybe you schedule an extra appointment or 2 with your therapist? Is it scheduling a discovery call with the dating coach who can help you with these things? What are these things that you can do right after that worst case scenario that you would need to plan out to make yourself feel better so you're not reeling from that? What do you want your support system to look like? What affirmations or empowering things do you want to tell yourself? And most importantly, planning, how do you want to get back to yourself in this situation? So the example of that is, say you're like, well, I'm worried because this guy is going to reject me. I'm terrified that I'm going to be intimate with this guy and he's going to ghost me. And the reason that I'm terrified of that and I'm so fearful of that is because I remember it happening to me before and it felt like shit. And I remember it also because I remember my ex-husband saying that I would never find somebody to love who would love me again. Oh, but now I am going to bravely imagine the worst case scenario, that happens to me again, that I get fooled, or I get, a guy, tricks me or again, and I'm intimate more quickly than I want to be. And now I feel bad. So then my immediate triage on that is that this guy's a jerk. I'm better than this guy. This is not the guy who is my match. This is not the guy who I'm aligned with. And good God, at least hopefully he gave you an orgasm. Okay, so now my recovery plan in this imaginary situation is I'm going to take some time for myself. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to journal for the next month. Every night, I am going to write down 3 things before I go to bed of what I am thankful for. I actually think maybe I'm going to volunteer at an organization that makes me feel great. It's going to help me focus on things that are just not myself. I'm going to plan a trip with my girlfriends. I am going to sign up for that French class. So these are things that we can do in that long term when we were planning our recovery in this worst case scenario to get back from ourselves. And so you see in all of these things, we can't prevent bad shit from happening. We can't prevent heartbreak from happening. We can't prevent rejection from happening. We can't prevent loss from happening. God knows I wish we could. But what we have to do is we accept it, and then we learn, okay, what are some things that I can do to mitigate it? God forbid, should that happen. So what are your guys' questions till this point? We've certainly covered a lot.
Well, I was just thinking about, aren't we supposed to be learning how not to make these mistakes before?
Right.
Like, like, I'm just thinking about, like, in this class and Ready for Love and everything, you're supposed to develop some skills where you're not.
Right. Absolutely.
Like,
No,
I mean, ultimately, if I ever go on a date and like someone wants to sleep with me, I'm really not going to, even though I probably would love it, but I'm just like, I just don't want to put myself in that position. And I'm sort of like, it feels like this means I've gone on a date, this fear navigation plan where I'm afraid to even go on the date. So like, I think this is a little more ahead of where I even am, because I haven't
Well, and
even.
that's right. No, and that's fine, because the things that we teach in Ready for Love, none of them exist in a vacuum.
Right.
So something that with that fear is, that is something that we want to work through and manage while we are identifying our dating standards,
Okay.
while we are learning to pinpoint our limiting beliefs that are maybe keeping us in a place that we shouldn't be. We want to manage that worst case scenario and manage that fear while we are learning to overcome our self-sabotaging behaviors.
Okay.
We're learning to manage that while we plan how to meet good men in real life and get offline.
Okay.
So
I mean, I'm just
no,
saying, like, I haven't even
no,
like
I know.
kissed anyone in so long. It's like, wow, this would be like, and
Right.
then I'm
Well,
worrying about like even sleeping with someone.
I know. Right. And so
So I'm
remember,
just like,
like,
I'm a little bit, it's a little more information. I understand. I know. I'm just hoping that I can. have a
Nancy,
few
I'll
more
give you
skills.
a tactical one that may not be official program content, but I've found actually that going out dancing is helpful, you know, because
Yeah.
it's something that's
Right.
like
You can have fun.
intimate to a degree, right? But like also not. It's sort of like a protected space. So
Yeah,
the
no, I
restaurant
think
near
that's
me, Cuba, does like a salsa night on Sundays. We went up to Grizzly Rose in Denver the other night and went line dancing.
sounds
You
like
know,
fun.
yeah, just random things like that. And so I had, you know, it was like the combination of music, movement, like human touch, but in kind of a safe space. And
Yeah,
that
that's a good
helped.
idea.
mhm.
I mean, think of something like that. Just because I have been so, in I might as well live in a monastery in a way, just because I've been so hurt, and then also, so I have other stuff in my life that keeps me from doing some things. So yeah, that's a really good idea.
Right. And here's a good analogy that I can offer on that you're like, oh my God, there's so much stuff that we're learning about in Ready for Love. Now I've got to figure out the fear thing too. I don't even know what my standards are for when I date again. Or I got to figure out, imagine an imaginary worst case scenario to break through my fear of rejection when I'm still trying to manage my limiting beliefs. Good God. But the tools that we learn within this program are ones that are a la carte, are ones that we can use, ones we can put away when we don't need them, ones that we can bring forth. And an example, if I can offer this, is that there's a travel example. I'm, as Nicole knows, I love to travel. I've been to over 80 countries. And so let's say my next trip, this is just notional. Let's say my next trip is to Pakistan. And so I might be afraid of being held hostage, in Pakistan. So it's kind of like, okay, have I ever been, or drowning, exactly. Have I ever been held hostage before? No, but I was detained at the border of Azerbaijan, and I was held for questioning at the Russian border, and those were very terrifying. But then that didn't stop me from traveling, but I just remembered, hey, next time you go into a place that's a little bit shady, don't be stupid. Don't try to be a comedian to the border guard. Don't try to do these things, and you'll probably be okay. But it's drawing on that past experience to then navigate with present experiences. But then we look at what are the things in the future that might be an issue. Oh, are Pakistani police, could they detain me? Could they, think, oh, she's going to be shady. Okay, so then what am I going to do to prevent that? You can't say don't go to Pakistan, but it's like, okay, I am going to be polite. I'm not going to try to make it like a comedy hour, and maybe I go with the tour group instead. So that's kind of the analogy that I can offer there is.
Understand.
But it is definitely, and since we are, we're very early on in the Ready for Love group coaching, this might be, well, I don't fucking know yet. What are you asking me, Martha? But it is something I would definitely invite you to visit and review, even in a couple of weeks, or even when our group coaching is over.
I understand what you're saying.
It's a good question, though.
Okay.
You're like, good God, woman. So something.
Also, Martha, I just want to tell you, I have a little bit of a time. I mean, I really do have to get off soon.
That's fine. Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
No worries. Well, just go ahead and exit when you need to. We'll finish the class, and the recording will be available to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. So the step 5 and the final part of the fear navigation plan is to embrace your courage. So we kind of talked a little bit about this with my silly kind of let's travel to Pakistan analogy. But when we are thinking about pushing past our fear when dating again, something that I would invite you to reflect on is, in what ways in situations have I been courageous in the past? What situations did I think I was not going to work through that I could never have handled, but I was able to handle? And that's not to minimize trauma or celebrate trauma. That's not the intention here, but it is just a general reminder for you all, when you do want to date again and you're feeling a little bit afraid, there is nothing that you haven't done before that has not prepared you for dating again. Bottom line, the courage and the skill set and the wisdom and the experience that you have garnered in these decades of existence on this earth have made you into a place, into a person that you do have the ability to go out and find love. You do have it in you. Yes, there's going to be some silly things that happen. It might be a little bit of a shit show, but when you look at what you want, which is love in a wonderful premium relationship, you have the courage to do that. And you have the ability to navigate whatever silly ass snafus might come in your way. And if you are still feeling a little bit trepidatious, I would invite you to think about, how can you apply that courage that you've had before? You've gone up for promotions. You've had tough conversations with people in your life. You might have done things that you never thought that you had the courage to do, and you just did it like that. How did that courage that you showed in these past situations in your life, how can you apply even an ounce of that courage when you're looking to date again? And another thing I would offer is, if you do want to date again and you're just letting that kind of fear hold you back, something I would offer you is, how does inaction because of fear actually harm your love life? So I'm not a sports person, but I can't remember who said this. I think it was like Wayne Gretzky, but it was something along the lines of, you miss all the 100% of the shots that you never take. And so if you know that love is for you, maybe in the future, maybe right now you're busy, or right now that you're healing and you're going through some other things and you're not quite ready to go out and meet men. But even if love is in your future and you know you want that, you know you want to have a partner, you know you want to be with someone who understands you and cherishes you and loves you. And yes, they are out there. I promise they are. If you want to make that experience, and if you want to put yourself out there to find that person, it is going to take a little bit of a risk. It is going to have to take a little bit of that fear and tolerance. But do you want to give up the chance to find that wonderful person just because there's a little bit of fear? Don't let that inaction out of fear and feeling petrified out of fear actually harm your love life. And then maybe that's not a love life right now because you're working on yourself, but a love life in a year or 6 months or a year or 2 years. Don't let fear stop that, because your next greatest love story, maybe the best one in your life, is out there waiting for you. And he or they or whatever, we're inclusive here, is on the other side of that fear. So something that I would leave you all with is one of my favorite quotations. I can never say her name, Annis Nin, I think, that, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
That's
I
really
want you
good.
guys, I love that. I love that too, right? And so maybe it's not tomorrow. Maybe there are still things that you are working on that you would like to navigate, or some kind of mindset, or some things such as you want to know your standards. You want to know you want to work on your limiting beliefs. You want to actually have a really great surefire plan to meet somebody that has nothing to do with online dating. Maybe you want to work on those things first before you get out there. But even if you are feeling trepidation, and even if you are feeling fear, I would invite you to come back to this meditation and this quotation, that risk to remain tied in the bud, that risk to be fearful, is going to at some point be more painful than it is to get out there. And so I would kind of leave you with, I like to call it, I think we're all slightly Irish here, so I call it like Martha's Irish blessing, that I formulated last night for anybody out here in cyberspace who's going to be watching this, or any of the ladies in the Ready for Love program when they watch this. But here's what I hope for you, and here's my blessing for you, is that may your courage always be stronger than your fear, especially when it comes to finding love. And may your capacity to love again be greater than any sorrow that you have experienced from love in the past. And may your self-worth and that confidence that you have in yourself and the ability to find love, may that always crush your limiting beliefs.
Are you gonna give us little stickers with this on it for, when we
Do you want me to
graduate?
give you a sticker? I absolutely can do that. If you want stickers, I will make stickers for you.
Well, or not even stickers, like you should just have them like, they should be in the background and we're having our class.
I'll see
or
what
something.
our graduation. Yeah, like I'll see what I'll talk to my person. I'll see what I'll see what
No,
I
it
can.
doesn't, I'm just
I
saying
know,
it's good.
I know. So that concludes our little bonus session on navigating through fear when it comes to dating again. If anybody wants to stay on for any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I really hope that you enjoyed this bonus training. I'm going to have this uploaded and available for on-demand replay, as well as listening to it kind of via a podcast situation. And so that's all I have. And I hope some of these things are going to be useful for you to work past your fears and finding the love of your life. That's
Thank
all
you.
I have.
It was really nice. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Sound good.
Bye.
Sounds good.
Do you want to